everybody. Well, welcome to this kind of quick session. This is really supposed to be kind of more of a tangible session for all of you to help you kind of navigate what resources are available for you when you're looking for your job and internship search process as an international student. As you may be aware, there are a couple of different barriers for all of you than there are for domestic students on finding a position. Because employers do need to be able to sponsor you with a visa. And so we're going to kind of talk about how do we kind of navigate that so that you guys are targeting your search as best as possible to find employers that are able to hire you. That way you're not necessarily putting out all those applications to have the employers say, unfortunately, we're not able to hire you. Now, what gets confusing with that is you don't technically need, employers don't need to use any sort of visa sponsorship if they're trying to hire you on an internship with CPT. However, most companies are looking to retain their interns and use their interns as potential full-time hires. So what happens is they say, if I can't necessarily hire you full-time because I can't sponsor you on a visa, I'm also potentially not going to look at you for an internship because I'm trying to convert all of my interns to full-time. So that's why sometimes when you think about like, well, as an intern, I don't need to have that visa sponsorship. From the employer perspectives, they're still seeing that as a component. Which is why we say, look at companies who, look at companies who have been able to hire in the past, companies who have already put in applications for students that have needed visa sponsorship. That way you can see who are ones that might be more willing to, move forward in the process, okay? So that's kind of why we did put together this workshop tonight to help you navigate that a little bit, just because it can be a little tricky and difficult to go through all of that. So it's mainly going to be stuff on our website and showing you resources. But the first thing that I wanted to kind of introduce to you is this is an infographic that we have on our website that kind of breaks down all of the numbers for you. For us, it's kind of a little bit of a reality check for all of you to be able to have plan A, plan B, plan C. Because I think finding a job in the US tends to be most international students' goals. We find that about 80% of students that come to the US for their education are looking to stay in the US versus about 20% look to go home. But because of that, it creates a really interesting dynamic because there are only a certain amount of visas that are able to be given out for international students. So this just kind of helps you break it down a little bit more visually. So we currently have about 700 international students here in SMEAL. They're all undergraduates and about 5,000 undergraduate students across the entire university. So I will say you actually in SMEAL have a lot more international students in this college than on other colleges. If you break it out between 13 different colleges, the largest are SMEAL and engineering, where you find the most international students. On top of that, there's about 400, I'm just gonna say 450 undergraduate students in the US, which is a lot of international students in the US currently. And then when you break that down even further, there are only 65,000 visas available to international undergraduate students. So there are 442 undergraduate international students currently studying, but only 65,000 available visas. That's where it comes into play, where you're kind of really competing for those visa places because there's not a lot of them. So as you can see, there's 85 total, okay, but 20,000 of those is actually only for graduate programs. So if you have a master's, PhD, all of that, you get 20,000 by yourself. And then there's 65 that is used for both undergraduate and graduate. So it's kind of like if you have a graduate degree, you kind of earn there twice because you can be a part of that whole 85 versus if you're an undergraduate, you're only in the 65, but you're also lumped in there with students who have graduate degrees. Does that make sense? Okay. So because of that, it really creates some interesting numbers. And we've done the math on our own students, which is really the data that we can really showcase because it's the students that, I think everything's going to look different depending on where you go. But about 14.5% of our SMEAL international graduate students actually do find employment in the US. This was as of 2017 because we're always a year behind on data. So looking at 2018, we're hoping to get that updated fairly soon. I don't honestly expect a big change. The reason is because the numbers of visas hasn't changed. We've been at 65,000 visas for years. So as long as there's lots of international students here and not a lot of visas, that percentage is still going to be pretty low. And then that's just for an FYI, it does cost the employer money to sponsor you for a visa if you're looking to actually work full time. That's the average that it costs. So if you think about it in terms of employment, you basically have to tell yourself, why am I worth $6,500 more than the other candidates going for this role, right? Because I may have, say I'm offering an entry-level position as an accountant for $50,000. So if I give that to a domestic student, then I'm spending $50,000 on that student. But if I'm hiring an international student, I'm technically spending we'll just say $57,000 on that student, right? Why are you worth, right? What skill sets do you bring to the table? What have your experiences showcased that make you worth $7,000 more than that other student? That is something to really think about, because you have to prove that that's worth it to them to not go with the lower amount of money. Okay, does that make sense for everybody? Okay, that is really only a 1-year cost when they're applying for the visa sponsorship. But as business students, you actually only do get 1 year of OPT before the employer does have to sponsor you. So pretty much as soon as you go into the entry-level position, they're going to have to put in that money and actually apply for that sponsorship. And the reason you find that a lot of employers don't put in, say that they can have that visa sponsorship is because, say you did amazing, you did an internship with me, I'm gonna go ahead and do your 1 year OPT on full time. I'm gonna sponsor you, I'm gonna front that $6,500 and apply for a visa sponsorship for you. You're getting into that pot of 65,000 visas with everyone else that has applied for visa sponsorship, which is a lot more than 65, and it's a straight lottery as to who gets picked. So even as the employer, if I really like you and I think you did an amazing job, I'm like, yes, apply for visa sponsorship. I have no guarantee that I'm going to keep you. It's not based off of like recommendations or how well you did or the industry you're in. It's literally like, here are the 150,000 applications we got. We have 65 available, and it's drawing names out of the hat, basically. So that makes it really scary for employers, because they're like, I've spent a year training you, I've spent this money, and now I'm just praying and waiting and hoping that I get to keep you. And if your name isn't pulled from that lottery, there's nothing they can do, because you no longer have any more OPT. So that's why you do find a lot of international students going on to graduate programs, so they can have more time in the US, more OPT opportunities. It's also why you find them going into more STEM fields, because if you're in a STEM field, you actually can get extensions for your OPT up to 3 years. So that does allow employers to potentially apply for visa sponsorship for 3 years instead of 1 year when you're doing your OPT. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions on any of those numbers that I kind of threw at you? Did I scare anybody? Yes.
All the SMEAL degrees only have 1 year OPT.
The only one that doesn't is the new major actuarial science. Now that that's separated away from risk management, they do have the STEM designation, but that's the only one. Good question. Anything else right now? All right. So because of that, our job with the Business Career Center is to really help you understand the resources you do have to help you in that job search, because it can be a little bit tricky, and it's a numbers game. It's a lot of applying. So we have a lot of different resources dedicated to help you in doing this. There are a few links down here that you could look at. This is the global one here, is literally the US government and showcasing you all of the numbers and statistics of all the international students in the US. And then this one is basically going to take us to a page that I'm going to go to, which is our page that serves all international students. So on our website, this is all on the SMEAL Business Career Center's website. If you Google that, that's where you're going to find all of this. And under people we serve, we actually have a tab specifically for international students. And I actually already have that up. So if you click that tab, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get eligibility for internships, which you can and can't do. Most of the time, just as a rule of thumb, international students are only allowed to do a summer internship. You're not allowed to do a co-op. You're also not allowed to do a full-time internship during the school year. That has to do with the fact that you're on a student visa, and so your main purpose is to be here and do your curriculum. So if you're doing a full-time internship while you're also trying to study, it's not necessarily due to the purpose. So they say summer internships only for the most part. Okay. Then you come down here and you have a couple of different resources. One of the biggest ones that we actually just created is a really great document, which has pretty much everything imaginable that you could ever want as an international student. And it walks you through, your eligibility, internship requirements, contact information for DISA, which is really important. You're going to need that when you get that. The different kinds of OPT, CPTs, the ways that you can kind of work within the U.S., different strategies for actually finding an internship, different resources, which we're going to actually go through. So this kind of puts everything together in one packet for you. But we also have a lot of them kind of broken down into these other tabs. So we have a tab that's for companies that have hired international students before, the visa stacks, international internships, which we'll talk about, and then other helpful sites that are third-party sites that as Penn State students you do get to have for free. But if you try to Google them outside of Penn State, they may charge you. So make sure you do them through Penn State. So we're going to kind of walk through those and show you how they can be helpful. Before we do that, because the one thing I don't have on this website is Midland Careers. I know we've mentioned that before. Midland Careers is a really great way to get started on your job search, but I would make sure you try to use the advanced filter. You can filter on, does this employer sponsor visas? This isn't always necessarily 100% accurate, but I recommend starting there. Again, because at some point they were potentially, friendly to hiring someone that's international. However, the person that filled it out might not be the same person that's interviewing. They might only be talking about one position in one department, so you may not necessarily be hiring, visas overall. So there's also a lot of stipulations when you do see that will hire on a visa sponsorship. Okay. So the first thing that I wanted to show you is a way to start narrowing down your employers. So what SMEAL has actually done is created a list of companies that have actually hired our SMEAL international students in the past. So this is coming right from students that have graduated from here. We break it down into internships and full-time. So if your goal is to stay in the US, I would recommend, regardless of what the major is, we do break it down by major, but you can see all the different companies and what years they've actually hired someone on CPT, okay? That's really important because it showcases that they're willing and excited to potentially hire international students. So I would always kind of start there and saying, are there opportunities available? Look on our website, looking at Elon Careers, see what kind of postings there are. So you can see accounting has a lot, but it's broken down actuarial science, finance. So we pretty much have every major listed in here. So I would definitely recommend that. And then if you go, we have them also broken down by other countries. If you are planning to go back to your home country, things like that. And then the last one here is companies that have hired students for a full-time position. And one thing to note about this though is it's not just in the US. So if that is your goal, make sure you pay attention to if it says it's for the US or if it's for another country as to where they're working. But again, looking at those companies and those websites and seeing what they have available. Then to go along with that, that's where you really want to start building connections and ties. So if say you're really interested in Dell, that's the first one I see here, and you see that they have a posting online, but you don't really know anyone from Dell. To be honest, Dell doesn't recruit heavily here at Penn State. You need to. So they might do a job posting, here and there, but not going to be on campus. Making a connection to someone who works for the company is really valuable. So one way I would do that is using LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, you can find alumni from Penn State that currently work at Dell. You can also navigate and find recruiters that work at Dell to have a conversation, build that network, learn a little bit more about Dell, what their expectations are, what the skill sets they're looking for, how does that match with what you're looking for. You're not asking them for a job, okay? You're asking them more about the company and the culture, maybe their career path, but building that connection potentially could lead you to the opportunity to stand out in that recruiting process, because if they really like you, they might refer you to a job, they might have, you know, an in with that recruiter. So if you do see some companies on here that have hired in the past, I think that's a really great starting point because it showcases they've hired students in the past. Questions on this resource? If not, the next two that I really did want to show you, which are external vendors, are called GoingGlobal and myvisajobs.com. So they're listed right here. You do have an account with Penn State. You should be able to sign up for free, not a problem. I'm not necessarily going to go into them specifically, more talk about what they do. But so GoingGlobal is basically a resource where you can either look for jobs in other countries. So if you wanted to go work in Ireland for an internship, they would have postings there, requirements of, you know, if you need to have be a citizen or anything like that. Or they have what's really cool is this US city guide. And within that, you can actually click on individual US cities and find employers who've applied for visa sponsorships for different candidates. So that way, if I know that I want to work in New York City, which tends to be a big one for students here at SMEAL or DC or Philly, I can pick those cities, go in, put in, you know, the job function, the industry, and see what companies have actually applied for students to seek work, have work visas. Then that's when you'd be like, oh, okay, great, they're friendly, let's go to their website. Okay, so that's basically like an external way to do the same thing that we did with our list, but across more than just SMEAL students. Okay, and then similarly, My Visa Jobs, I don't know if anyone's used this before, this shows you the top 100 companies that have applied for visa sponsorship as well. And this is updated every year. So if you see companies on there year after year, that's a pretty good sign that they're pretty open and friendly to want to be hiring international students. So that might be a company that I'm trying to target, a company that I'm trying to apply for, finding a way to build that network, build a person connection, which is really important because when you're just on paper and you're applying online, it's really hard to stand out. It does not matter if you're an international student or if you're a domestic student. The resume is tricky because a lot of you are qualified. There's going to be a lot of you applying. So the way to kind of stand out is how do I make sure that I am able to communicate with someone, be able to tell them why I'm excited about this position, what it is about the company that really, you know, I'm drawn to, how my skills tie into that. How do I see this fitting into my long-term career goals? And then they can actually see you as more of a person than, you know, just that kind of name on the resume, because that can be tricky. So definitely thinking about if you have top companies or you found some companies within here that you're really interested in, really utilizing that LinkedIn is going to be important. You can also use LionLink. LionLink is basically another networking tool that we have that's specifically designed for Penn State, basically LinkedIn for Penn State alums. The reason it's a little bit nicer is it's alums who've already said, yes, I want to talk to students. I want to connect with them. I want to help them in whatever way I can. Versus LinkedIn, it's a crapshoot, right? You may have someone that is interested in talking to you, might not. So I say use both because on LinkedIn, you're going to have a lot more people, but not as many being receptive to talking. LionLink, you're going to have less people, but more people that are receptive to talk. So utilizing both really does make sense. Any questions on any of those resources so far? Okay. The other one that I wanted to let you or to talk about is international internships. Have any of you heard of international internships? Have one hand shaking yes. Okay. So there are a lot of third-party providers or vendors, we'll call them, that will basically do all of the work for you to find you an international internship. And the reason is because if I'm in the US, and I'm from the US, and I want to go work in Italy, I don't really have any contacts there. I have no idea how the job search process looks like. I don't know any of those types of things. So I basically will have someone do all of that for me and then basically place me into an internship. The reason we tend to recommend it for a lot of international students is a lot of those third-party vendors have international internships in the US. So Chicago, New York, and I think San Francisco are the three ones that I'm thinking of that they have them, where if you utilize them, I'll use IES as an example, they're one of the third-party vendors. you would basically apply through IES and say that you're interested in being placed in New York City in a finance internship. And then they will take care of setting up interviews, looking at your resume, and placing you into an internship that summer. The catch is those internships are typically not paid, and you typically have to pay that person because they're the ones that are doing the work and finding your internship for you. So you're basically hiring a third-party recruiter, it's like a headhunter, to find you something. But it does get you the ability to work in the US, to get that experience, to understand the culture of being in the workplace here in the US, to help you on your full-time job search as well. So I always have to say utilize that as a backup plan because a lot of those applications aren't due till February or March. So you could technically apply now and then have it sitting there waiting for you if nothing else comes along, potentially go that route. And it is a financial burden because you do have to pay for it. It is different depending on the city that you decide to go into. Or you could do an international internship and go to another country if you wanted to, because they have a whole host of them everywhere. So if you click on the website, they have a whole list here of their international internships, and you can actually then go in and see all of the different programs and what they offer, what language requirement there is, which some of them do have a language requirement. And I'm trying to think of where the ones are that list the US options. I know IES has it, so I'm just going to go to, because I don't think they have it listed, which is interesting. If I go to, go to their website, you'll be able to find a program, and they have a whole list of them. And you can do it by country, Europe, and then US, million programs. A lot in Europe, apparently. And then yeah, there's the New York one. So they, I thought they had Chicago, but it looks like they must only have New York. But so that is an option to consider. I usually say that's maybe like your last option because it does create a financial burden. But if your end goal is potentially to stay in the US, it is helpful to get into that culture. I do recommend looking back in your home country for internships and for jobs. Even if your goal is to stay in the US, an internship even back home is going to be helpful because it's showcasing that you're getting some experience in your industry, in your field. And then it's learning, how do I talk about this experience in a way that is going to be showcased that this makes me better, this gives me a different perspective than US students to be able to do a really good job at this position. Okay, because that global experience is really, really valuable. I mean, for the most part, most companies are global at this point. So even if you're in the US, potentially you're working with clients in other countries. So you'll be able to talk about, you know, what it's really like to kind of work in that business setting in another country. You'll be able to understand the language, the culture. So even having an internship back home is a lot more valuable than not doing anything if you're not able to find something in the US. So I always say do a concurrent search so you can be looking at things in both places. Does anyone have a question on international internships or anything we've talked about so far? No? And then the last resource that I would talk about is global programs. Global programs is also listed on our website, but they basically are the hub of anything that as an international student you would need, but they maintain a list of employment. The only reason I hesitate on this one is because they do it for everyone. So they look at CPT and OPT companies that have hired them, but across all colleges and across whether it's undergraduate or graduate degrees. And they don't differentiate between who's who. So you can start to see companies that have hired them, but it's a little bit trickier because they could have hired them to be a mechanical engineer, or they could have hired them to be a PhD researcher. But it does at least get you a starting point of companies. But that's listed on here. Let's see if we moved it. This is all the employment stuff, employers who have hired them on OPT. And then, oh, they got rid of the list. Never mind, so I'm lying. They used to have a list, but I guess it's because it was really difficult to search. So I always recommended that one, but I'm sorry, I didn't really recommend that one because it was hard to search, so it looks like they also had that same issue. But I would definitely go here if you do get an internship or a full-time position, because you need to make sure that it fits in with what your goal is. So when you're on CPT or OPT, the job that you get has to directly relate to your major. Because of the fact that you are here on a curriculum student visa, and say I'm an accounting student, I then need to be doing something with that accounting degree as my full-time job, right? Because that's why I was here in the US. I can't decide, nope, never mind, I'm gonna go do management or I'm gonna go do sales, because my degree was in accounting. So you wanna make sure that you can make sure that it is the major that you're in is related to the job functions that you're hoping to do. Global programs in our office help you to make sure that that does tie in when you do get those offers, because we do have to see when you apply for a CPT, we do need the written offer and the job description to make sure that it's viable for your major. Okay, so that's an important piece to make sure that you know that when you are looking for things that you need to be applied to the major you're in.
Is it only the major that is considered, or also the minor?
Minors help. It's a part of it. You can definitely utilize that, but the main is the major, just because of the fact that that's what you're getting your degree in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now business is, a little bit broad. So if in the job description it says it's willing to hire finance, accounting, or another business-related major, then that works.
Okay.
Right? It's really like if this job says like I need actuaries, and you don't have an actuarial science degree, that doesn't work. Okay. Just know that when the broader you get, so say I'm looking at a position that does hire any business major, you're now also getting a lot more students that apply. But so it's not necessarily detrimental. It's not like, for the most part, they're all very, very straight lines, but you have to be aware of that because you have to just showcase that they match up. Good question. Any other questions on that? Or any other questions in general, or anything about the resources that we went over? I definitely say it's something where you maybe want to dedicate one day a week to kind of start thinking through and looking at different employers, looking at job postings, maybe trying to make 1 or 2 connections on LinkedIn. It's a long process. It's a hard process. We actually did an international student panel the other week with international students who were able to be successful in their internship search, and basically what they all said was, it's really, really hard, but it's not impossible. But it's really, really hard, and not everyone is that lucky. About 14% are lucky. So just be aware of that students that are able to be successful is really exciting, but having multiple plans is really, really helpful. And if there's no other questions, that's all I have for you for a quick run through our resources. No? Okay, if not, if you have any individual questions, I'll be here for a few minutes. If not, definitely come see us at the Business Career Center. We will help with individual career coaching, helping you with that resume, the mock interviews. I definitely stress on a mock interview, especially for the communication skills component, because it is the main way that they assess you is through an interview. So definitely recommend those things when you are to that point. Okay? All right. Have a good night, everybody.